Hello everyone, and welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is Something is Wrong with Jack by cmseebold. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe and become a resident of Hill Street. And let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Now, let's get to this nightmare. It began several months back when me and my best friend Jack were in a car accident. I would like to say the wreck wasn't my fault, but my alcohol levels would suggest otherwise. We've all made bad choices. Mine just cost me a broken arm, while Jack, who was unbuckled, was sent flying through my windshield. When I had regained my consciousness, I scrambled out of the vehicle to check on my friend, who I was almost certain had just died. However, to my surprise, I found him standing up and seemingly unharmed, other than some scrapes. Of course, I'm happy that Jack survived. However, the likelihood that he would be sent flying through my windshield while driving over 70 miles per hour and be unharmed is nothing to overlook. But what was more worrying was the noticeable change in behavior that occurred after this. Jack still seemed to be himself, but he seemed to develop a bit of an edge to him. He started getting into fights when we went out and just seemed to have less care for his own well-being. I suppose being in a near-death experience could explain this behavioral change. About 2 weeks ago, he dropped contact with me entirely. It was pretty abrupt, and I could pinpoint no reason for this. If he was mad about the crash, he would have cut ties then. But everything seemed normal, besides his sudden change in behavior. And then his number wasn't working, and he stopped showing up to work. I wouldn't blame anyone for quitting the crappy fast food joint we had worked at. But considering Jack had also dropped out of college, I was suspecting the worst. A few days ago, after getting off after midnight from work, I decided enough was enough. I had to check in on him. I pulled up to his apartment building without notice, aiming to catch him there, hopefully alive. Walking up to his door, I took a deep breath and then knocked. There was no answer. I knocked again several times before trying the door. To my surprise, it was open. The place was a mess, fast food trash and junk strewn about. This wasn't too abnormal, but as I investigated further, I noticed there were large claw-like marks in the walls and mangled furniture scattered everywhere. Going to check Jack's computer, I found that it too was damaged beyond repair. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed a business card laying on the computer desk. It was for a bar, supposedly in town, known as Barry Bones. A small logo of a skull wearing a top hat while winking accompanied the name. Despite living here for the better part of a decade, I had not heard of this place once. Either way, I took it as my only clue. I headed that way. It was a short 8-minute drive from Jack's apartment. I pulled into the mostly empty street, as most of the shops along Main Street were closed at this hour. It certainly didn't help my nerves to see how isolated I was if something did go wrong. I looked up at the small bar, which I had never seen before, which was marked by the same silly skeleton icon. Barry Bones. What a stupid name. I had parked about a quarter mile from the bar and observed for a bit. It didn't seem to be open, just like everything else at this hour. There was at least one other floor above the main bar. I probably should just go home, I thought to myself. Do I really think Jack would be at some corny bar at 2 in the morning, all on his own. Honestly, I had begun rationalizing to myself, trying to find a way not to enter that building. I had a slight but growing feeling of dread creeping up on me. Yet, I couldn't place my finger on the source. That's when I saw him. Jack was walking along the sidewalk about a half-mile from the building. He looked rough, his stubble grown out, and sunken tired eyes, and his brown hair in a jagged mess. Yet his face seemed stern and determined. He was wearing a trench coat, jeans, and what appeared to be combat boots. Needless to say, not his typical attire. I continued to hide out in my vehicle, hoping he wouldn't recognize it. Jack must have walked from his apartment here, hence why I beat him to the spot. He approached the building and placed his palm on the front door, as if inspecting it. After a moment, he pushed it open and walked into the bar. "Well, I guess it's open," I muttered to myself. But Jack was in there, and I hadn't seen him for weeks. I was not going to leave just because of a bad feeling, when my best friend could be in danger. I worked up the courage, making sure I had my pocket knife on me, and stepped out of the vehicle. Walking up to the building cautiously, I noticed the bar doors were beaten down and made of wood, like an old Western movie. Pushing them open, I was met with a pretty standard-looking bar with scattered tables and light-up signs of various beer brands on the walls. The thick layer of dust told me no one had put back a drink here in years. Taking steps slowly into the room, I examined for a sign of where Jack may have gone. That's when I heard rustling behind the bar. I slowly creeped around the bar and into the kitchen. It was too dark to make out much of the room, but I could see the counter in the center of it, with some empty bottles and junk scattered about. I stopped completely as I heard what sounded like huffing and panting from behind the counter. I pulled out my phone slowly and walked around the counter, turning the flashlight app on. I was frozen in terror as the source of the noise turned to look at me. The creature had pale, yellowish skin and lanky limbs. Its face was hard to discern, besides the gaping mouth full of large rotting incisors, which were smeared with what I presumed to be blood. It was likely fresh too, as I noticed the body the creature was hunched over. Not wanting to be the next meal for the abomination, I sprinted out of the kitchen and leaped over the bar. Before I could turn towards the front door, the monster had leaped onto me, pinning me down. Drool fell onto my face as I attempted to push it off, to no avail. The creature opened its mouth yet again, revealing the jagged teeth. I couldn't reach my pocket knife, so with no other option, I shoved my forearm in its face. I knew one bite on my neck or chest would be enough to kill me, so I figured my forearm would be a better trade. But considering its teeth were the size of steak knives, I wouldn't buy me much time. Before it could tear apart my arm, however, a gunshot rang out, and a bullet went through the creature's neck. It turned towards the one who was firing, and so did I. There was Jack, holding some sort of pistol. While I was relieved he was not the corpse the creature was feeding on earlier, I soon realized the monster was now sprinting towards him. I almost rather have him been dead than have to watch him die right in front of me. But to my utter shock, as the creature leaped over the counter, Jack raised his leg effortlessly, kicking the creature in the jaw and sending it flying. He jumped over the counter, running at it before it even landed. When the creature crashed into the table, smashing it to bits, Jack placed his foot on the neck to pin it down. He fired 3 more shots into its head before it finally stopped struggling. Then he took a deep breath and looked back at me. "You shouldn't be here, Nathan." He looked very upset while he said this. I didn't know what to say. My best friend disappears for weeks, and when I go looking for him, he tells me to get lost. I stood up slowly and walked over to him. "Jack, I have no idea what's going on. You haven't even called. Did you expect me not to look?" Jack looked upset, like he wanted to tell me something, but couldn't. Then he made eye contact with me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You need to leave, Nathan. This is too dangerous for you to be here. I doubt that was the only one." Before I could respond, Jack screamed out in pain. A large bony appendage protruded through his chest from behind him, causing him to spit out blood. He was then flung into the bar, smashing it on impact. The creature, still alive, looked at me. At least, I think it was. I got a better look at it this time. Its head was smooth with no clear features besides the mouth, and it hunched over, letting its gangly arms hang forward. On its back were multiple spider-like limbs, which hadn't been there before. The monster stood over me, at least 7 feet in height. I swear, it seemed to be getting bigger, like it was evolving. All of this was too much to consider, on top of the fact that Jack was likely dead. I had no time to mourn, however, as I grabbed a bar stool and swung it towards the creature's head. While mostly futile, it bought me just enough time to run a few feet before being stabbed through the leg by one of its appendages. I screamed out in pain, falling over, as yet again the monster loomed over me, like a cat toying with its prey. Still, I pathetically attempted to back away. There was no time to think about all the strange things that had led up to this moment. There was no time to ponder what this demonic beast that stood over me was, or where it came from. And there was no time to react, as the much larger humanoid beast grabbed it by the back of its neck, causing it to shriek in pain. A large, muscular monster with a charcoal black hide and demonic horns stood over the faceless yellow creature as the sound of bones snapping and popping rang out. The demon breathed heavily, its glowing red pupils staring directly at the now helpless creature. Then, in one swift motion, the black beast swung the creature in the air and back down to the ground, shattering its entire head at once. The beast then proceeded to start eating it. I quietly crawled to a table, using it to stand myself up and look towards the bar. I had to see if maybe Jack had survived. When I saw Jack's body no longer, I turned back to the large creature, whose chest wound slowly healed. I limped out as fast as I could, while what was once Jack paid me no mind. I made it home and have been resting for a couple of days. My leg is badly wounded, but I was able to stop the bleeding. I'm not sure if I want to leave the house at this point, even if it is to get my leg treated. My friend is out there, and he is a monster. I am not sure what to do from here, but I will try to do some research after I post this. I won't be going to work for a while.